faithful stewardship of the life entrusted to her. That is what true love is. Faithful stewardship of the life entrusted to her. God entrusted this life to this young woman because he knew she could handle it.
Yeah.
Love was what drove her to do what she did. Not the abortion issue, not anything else. It was love that drove her to do this.
All right, let's talk. Join authors Bill Watkins and Corey Piper as they talk about life, faith, and culture.
Love is so incredible, so powerful when it's truly experienced. It really can transform people's lives, which is why I think it gets distorted and corrupted into something less than what it really is. Love itself is extraordinarily powerful. That's what I would like to do, is bolster and elevate our view of love. You may not be able to articulate it perfectly, but you just saw what true love is. And that's what happened with Tierre. You know the story of Tierre. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but I don't know if you know.
I'd love for you to share more about it. I find it to be really powerful.
Okay, so Tierre and I were married young. We married in Sedona, Arizona, and parents were there. It was a beautiful location on Oak Creek Canyon. Just beautiful. And then we moved from Sedona to Spokane because I was going to continue my youth ministry training. And we had our little spats and our arguments, and we had the first year honeymoon kind of moments, and then you start getting into marriage and finances and all those things, and there causes stress. It was just normal is what I'm trying to convey. Tierre's mom and dad had divorced when she was young, and they had both remarried, and she had good relationships with all four of her parents. And so there was that part of her, but she had become a Christian because of this dear friend of hers, Melissa, who invited her to youth group, and she heard the gospel. And her mom has a variation of Hinduism, her mom and stepdad. They go to India every year. And then her dad was at that time really into Robert Schuller and the Crystal Cathedral and the positive thinking movement, and very much Christianity gets you wealthy kind of an idea. But anyways, we got along great with her parents. They were, wedding, very supportive, and all these things of these two young, stupid people just getting married, and who knows how they were going to make a living. I was training to be a pastor. So we moved to Spokane, and we're continuing ministry. She's discipling young girls in the youth ministry. I'm discipling guys. We're living our life. And then she finds out she's pregnant, and came at a very unfortunate time. It wasn't a convenient time to be pregnant. And so we were wrestling with just the nature of the pregnancy and moving forward. My youth pastor, the guy I'm training with, brought me into his office and said, you really just need to quit doing all this. You need to actually make real money. Making $100 a month for interning was not going to support the family. And I did other jobs and odd jobs to supplement, but she was also working, and that wasn't going to be the case much longer. So all those normal things that every couple kind of goes through, discovering that you have to take care of these things. And then her gynecologist called us in. He was concerned about this heart murmur she had and high red blood cell count. And so this high red blood cell count combined with the heart murmur put some red flags up for him. So he sent her to a cardiologist. So he sat us down and said, well, I don't know what this is. Could be a lot of things. We need a cardiologist to look at you. And so we did that. And then within the week, came back and we had the news that she had what's called Eisenmenger's syndrome. Oh. I'll describe that more in a minute. Have you heard of it, or it's...
No.
Okay. And it's a very, very rare. The studies that they were drawing from to help us make our decision was about 20 women in all the United States and Canada, that they were looking at all the data from those two places. So that's how rare this was. Okay. So I'll describe Eisenmenger syndrome here in a minute, but we get called in And it gets explained to us. This first doctor, this first cardiologist says, you need to abort like right away. Can we pray about it? Can we have a little bit of time to think about this and what we're doing and just process this? 2 weeks more, it's safer for you within the next 2 weeks. So make a decision then. Do what you need to do. So we got a second opinion as well. We went to a different cardiologist and he basically told us the same thing. He just gave us a clearer understanding of what we were up against. And essentially what they were saying was an abortion, it's just as likely statistically for you to die having an abortion as it is just carrying to term. It's about 50-50.
Wow.
So, you go like flip a coin, right?
Yeah.
So this wasn't like a situation where mother's life is in danger. Clearly just have an abortion. That gets rid of the problem. See, the problem wasn't the baby. That revealed her problem. In a way, the baby was a blessing that exposed the problem because all the signs were there for years that she had an issue, but nobody noticed because they were very subtle. Here's some other symptoms of Eisenmenger syndrome. So I'll talk about that real quick, is clubbing of the fingernails and being light blue because the problem with Eisenmenger's is you're not getting enough oxygen to your body. So what her body was doing, because it was depleted of its normal resources of oxygen, it was producing more red blood cells. Then whatever oxygen you had more of it because you had more red blood cells. It's an adaptation the body has to compensate for the problem. So essentially, and I will put a picture up here, is the heart has 4 chambers. One chamber pumps it into the lungs, and then the lungs oxygenate your blood, and then it pumps it back into another chamber in your heart. And that's a low blood pressure thing. That chamber is uniquely low blood pressure because it just has to go to your lungs and back.
Okay.
And the capillaries are really tiny in your lungs. And it's just to oxygenate your blood. Then it goes into the big chamber, the one we all know our pulse and everything from, and it pumps it down to your toes and back. But it depletes the oxygen then. So your blood is distributing oxygen throughout your body, and then it comes back. And every time your heart beats, thump, thump. That's what's going on.
Okay.
It's oxygenating your blood and sending the oxygenated blood to your body and back and then reoxygenating. That's its cycle. We all kind of know that. Well, Eisenmenger syndrome is a reverse shunt. Her valve was allowing unoxygenated blood to get into the oxygenated blood. So instead of the unoxygenated blood that comes into the heart going through the lungs first, a percentage of it, I don't know exactly what that percentage would be, was pumping into her oxygenated blood, being released there. So her unoxygenated blood was coming back in, not getting reoxygenated, and just being pumped through her system again. So there's this leak, and it was a reverse leak. Some shunts, or heart murmurs, some heart murmurs are no big deal, and they get healed really quickly. In fact, as we did research on this for her, and the doctors looked into her medical history as an infant when she was first born, the doctors did hear a heart murmur, and they just said it would go away. And that's typical. It's not a fault.
Right.
It's not something you put blame on anybody. It's a perfectly rational thing because Eisenmenger, this reverse shunt, probably unheard of. And anyways, the symptoms, her heart didn't get better. And through her life, her body adapted in the way our bodies can. It's amazing what our bodies can put up with and how they adapt to even the abuses we inflict upon ourselves of our diet and everything, how it adapts. And sometimes it just can't adapt anymore. And that's what the baby introduced, was a stress on her heart that she hadn't had before. And now we had to deal with this in a way that we wouldn't have had to have dealt with it before. So to describe the severity of what she had, if she had never gotten pregnant, she likely would have died by the age of 30.
Oh my goodness.
And the
How
only
old
way
was she at this time?
She's 20. When she passes away, she's 20. We got married when she was 18.
Okay.
18 and a half. So, and then we found out about this about a year and a half into our marriage.
Gee.
Yeah. And there's a lot. So again, we're young, we're kind of stupid. We don't know what we're doing and all these kind of things. But then God matured her through this in a way that I find quite miraculous in and of itself. How we transformed from a couple that was kind of nitpicky. I mean, everybody does that, right? You get caught up into the dishes and you're cooking what and are you being lazy? You're all these things that we start noticing about that person we love so dearly. And just the everyday stuff. Well, suddenly with this big issue, having to deal with this, all that disappeared. And all that was left was Tierre's maturity. She's extraordinary. You were talking about love, the natural kind of love, like the lepers. Something happens to you that you didn't expect to happen to you. That's unfortunate that happens to you. There's a lot of unhealthy things that isn't even our fault for our diet. It's just our bodies are betraying us. It's like, God, why? Well, so Tierre, in dealing with this, gosh, I wish I have her journal. Good grief. Cry just from holding that up. But one of the things that she said, and I can't find the exact place right here, maybe I should, is, God, you made me this way for a soul and soul purpose.
Wow.
You made me this way because she was struggling with, God, why did you make me this way?
Sure.
And as she was wrestling with that agony and the knowledge that she could die from this, that you made me this way for a soul, S-O-U-L, and soul purpose, for a single purpose. And it reminded me of the blind man that Jesus healed. And all the Pharisees, all the religious people couldn't understand, thought that the blind man was blind because of sins of his parents or his own sins, because that's how God works, right? He just inflicts you with punishment for your evil doings. You're blind because of some horrible thing that you did. It's like Job's counselors. And Jesus says what? He says, I made you for this purpose, to be healed.
Yeah.
So we were kind of holding on to that idea that, and so did she, that, okay, God's purposes here, we don't know what they are, but maybe it's to maybe he'll heal her, or maybe he'll stand with her through this trial. And now he does, but the miracle I'll describe here in a little bit. So she has this Eisenmenger syndrome. Her heart is basically one chamber exchanging oxygen, and her body is now stressed beyond what it could handle just on her own resources with the baby. Because the woman's body, it's just incredible what they have going on.
Mm-hmm.
Once a woman gets pregnant, her body will start producing more blood. It actually increases the volume of blood that she has so that there's enough for this growing new human within her.
Yeah.
And so her body's resources then can do this. And one of the things that the body does is it produces this more volume. Now the capillaries and vessels are all kind of flexible, right? They kind of expand. Well, that's why her body can now expand and allow this larger volume of blood to be flowing through. Well, one of the side effects of Eisenmenger syndrome was, because it was basically one chamber, her blood pressure to her lungs was higher. It was like the body's blood pressure, not as strong as that, but it was a percentage increase. And the little capillaries had been dealing with that for her whole life, her 18 years of life, her 19 years of life. And so they had become calloused, so hardened, so they couldn't expand. So as the increase in the blood volume from the pregnancy came into play, it wasn't like, okay, her body can now allow enough blood to go through the lungs and increase the amount of oxygen available. It was the same as when she wasn't pregnant. So the percentage was dropping as the baby's demands became more. So even in a pro-life stance, there's this bit of justification for abortion, is when the mother's life is at stake, right?
Well, and did the doctors think that it could also impact the growth of the baby?
Oh, yeah.
The life of the baby?
Yeah. It was essentially, they gave us a 50% chance that the baby would survive delivery.
Sure.
50%. But it was also equal 50% chance that Tierre might die if she gave an abortion. And there was a 100% chance that the baby would die in an abortion. But 75% chance was the original assessment that so we're moving from 50% if she has an abortion, 75% chance she dies if she carries to term.
Okay.
So her chances were better to survive, but not zero, not for certain, because an abortion would create blood loss and difficulty, and that's what her heart couldn't handle. Cardiac arrest would happen even in an abortion. You can't make a decision on percentages. During those 2 weeks, this is where I want to really focus on, is not her health condition or the abortion decision or anything like that. I want to focus on how we had to wrestle with this and what she does. So in this case, we went to our elders, our pastors. My youth pastor, Jim Harper, was such a beautiful soul. He's just such a calm person. And he encouraged us to get a second opinion and to look into this more and to talk to the elders. And he just prayed with us. We talked to the elders, and the lead pastor, Chris Mueller, came back to us and said, essentially, the elders board is 50-50 on what you should do. I know you want us to give you advice, but all the men in there are sitting there going, if it was my half of them are saying, if it's my wife, yeah, or I'm aborting. Half of them are saying, no, I don't think it's justified. So 50-50. And they basically came to a standstill and just compassionately understood the dilemma we were in. And it isn't even, I was trying to help my wife now, Beth, understand this. It wasn't that I made a decision, but we made a decision, but it was really her that made the decision. It's an interesting dynamic. Nobody was twisting anybody's arm. Nobody twisted her arm. I didn't. The elders didn't. They were very honest with their own, oh my goodness, what would we do if this happened to us? And nobody really knew. And there's a special grace, I think, what God gives to people that are facing really tough decisions like this, that nobody else can interfere with. And the special grace, and nobody can experience. And that's what descended upon Tierre, was this special grace in spite of her fears. So this is what she wrote. This was after the decision had been made to continue with the pregnancy. I didn't have such a hard time tonight, and was thankful, for I know the Lord has his hand on me always. I am learning to trust more and more, and I'm learning more about the character of my God, and the reasons increase on why I first fell in love with Christ.
Wow. What a sweet soul.
A sweet soul. That's exactly it. Unbelievable. I am beginning to understand that I will trust without understanding. The question is not why, but who.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
yes.
Knowing God's doing it all and is in control of it all is all I need and should need to trust.
Yes.
My God is a big God, bigger than any other prophet, teacher, guru, or astrologer or psychic. Remember her family background.
Yeah.
He is the only one who knows all, is everywhere, in control of everything, sovereign, and is all-powerful. All right, see if I can handle this one. I am not afraid of death, for I live eternally with Christ, but I cry for the fear of losing those I love so dearly behind. My heart aches at the thought. She drew the picture of a heart. and aches at the thought. God knows I lean on him. Praise you, Lord, already for the future. There are times she describes where she just was weeping uncontrollably because she was so afraid of death. But as she went through that, facing her own demise, her own mortality at such a young age, what brought her peace was time reading scripture, the people around her that loved her, the reinforcement and the friendships that she had. All these kind of things were helping her hang in there, and her understanding of God was growing more deep. Tierre's choice to continue the pregnancy directly relates to her awareness that the unborn baby has as much value as her own. And that's rooted in her love of God and her awareness that God is our creator. Her life, she realized, was not more sacred than the one she was carrying in her womb. She wasn't subordinating her own right to life for a sake of some non-individual, but for the very reason that she recognized the humanity of the person in her womb. So she saw that person in her womb as worthy of her protection, and even to the point of losing her own life potentially. Now, she hoped, and we all hoped, we all prayed for this, that she would get through this and then be able to get that heart-lung transplant and everything that she needed to get on with her life after the pregnancy. But we had to get through this first. So the quality of her decision based upon a love that transcends, but it doesn't neglect life.
Right.
It transcends to another level, this agape love. When Christ became a man, and humbled himself to become one of us, he didn't do that sacrifice in the sense of there's this sense of great loss in what it is that he was doing. He was doing it because of the great gain that it would bring us.
That's right. That's love.
And so he saw the value of our life, and he died for us even while we were sinners. So I think about it this way too, is with Tierre, the baby had done nothing good to earn being saved, hadn't done anything bad to deserve being cast aside. The entirety of the baby's existence was completely in the hands of her mother, and Tierre had the ultimate power. She did have choice.
Yeah.
I totally believe in choice. I do believe, though, what choice you make matters. The morality, your ethic, who you are is what drives your choice. Tierre did have the ultimate power. Nobody could have coerced her or convinced her or done anything that she didn't do. She was strong enough to go, I need to abort, would have believed her. I need to continue on with this. I believed her, that was what her choice was leading us to do. Now, to show you the stress we were under, my dad gave me a call. My dad is a reverend, and I haven't really talked about this even in the book that I wrote, but he called up and we had this, it must have been an hour and a half conversation. And to boil it down, well, can't you look at aborting the baby as the baby sacrificing itself for Tierre? So you're saying Tierre is willing to put her life on the line for the baby. Okay. That probably certain death for her. We all understood that. There was no illusions about that. But my dad's point was, can't you look at aborting the baby as a sacrifice to help the mother? And I was like, I remember pacing around our rental house. We were running, I was like, what's going on? How am I processing this? And what it came down to is, Dad, I understand your heart. I'm not condemning your heart in this. I totally understand. This is hurting everybody. I get it. This is painful for her parents. It's painful for my parents. We're all struggling with this. We're all coming at this from different perspectives. And I said, Dad, the problem with what you just said is that sacrifice has to be willing. The baby is helpless. The baby is innocent. We can't talk to the baby and say, hey, are you willing to give up your life for the sake of the mother? No, we don't have that. This is it's on the mother. She's got to make this choice. And I praise God that Tierre's heart was turned towards the creator of the universe, salvation through Jesus Christ, because that's the only reason she had the strength to make this decision, is not because she thought, I got this great afterlife I can hold on to. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to stand up for the pro-life position. She was never doing any of that. We were not, in all of our conversations, we never talked about this decision in the context of abortion's murder. None of that. It was really rooted in love.
Yeah.
The way God loves. All right. Give you a minute. All right. So the way God loves. So even though the baby had not done anything to deserve birth and hadn't done anything to deserve death,
Right.
Tierre had the ultimate power. She could end that life and no one would have faulted her even. Nobody would have. Remember, 50-50 here. Nobody could put ourselves in and go, you should have done this or you should have done that. Okay. And she was strong. She's not weak. I did have somebody once say, did she really make this decision? Like implying that maybe she was coerced into it.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. Tierre was not that. You're just going to have to trust me. There's no coercing her to do something she didn't want to do. And she could have justifiably aborted her baby. That really was within the realm of possibility. And I think God's graciousness and everything would have overridden anything that we would have would have happened. And I don't want to speculate right now what would have happened. I'm only going to deal with what reality and what it is that happened. She made a choice that was not motivated by her willingness to cast aside her own life and set it aside for the sake of another. She willingly made this choice, went that route of putting her life in danger, continuing her life for the sake of somebody else. And it wasn't from some irrational indifference to self-preservation. Like, she was just naive enough where she didn't realize what she was doing, and she just went for it anyways, naively, like simply, like there was no thought behind it. I can tell you from her journals and from everything I've been reading, this was not some indifference to her self-preservation. She wanted to live, and she knew this was putting her life at risk, but she didn't want to put the life of the baby at risk too.
Mhm.
She understood that because she understood the rational self-interest of living life to its fullness. It was rational for her to move forward with this pregnancy, because what is life really all about? Is life just living? It's actually living life to its fullest, right? It's actually having value in your life, purpose in your life. It isn't just staying alive longer so you can breathe a few more days. She understood the rational self-interest of living life to its fullness and the joy of that. So this is what's on her tombstone. Life held on to selfishly is no life at all. That's what she stood for.
Yeah.
So instead of cowering in the swamp of, I must value myself above all other considerations, she recognized that facing her destiny and courageously facing the fiercest enemy straight on was the surest way to win. Tierre's decision upheld the highest definition of the good, not only living for yourself, but also for others. And Paul talks about that, right?
Mhm.
Don't just look out for your own interests, but look out the interest of others. So I just want the choice she made before I describe how it played out. Her endurance wasn't suicidal recklessness, naive, pie in the sky thoughtfulness. Like, cannot paint her that way at all. And I will viciously defend her character on this. Wasn't suicidal recklessness, but it was faithful stewardship of the life entrusted to her. That is what true love is. Faithful stewardship of the life entrusted to her. God entrusted this life to this young woman because he knew she could handle it.
Yeah.
Love was what drove her to do what she did. Not any other thing, not the abortion issue, not anything else. It was love.
Yeah.
That drove her to do this.
I think that's clear given what you shared out of her diary, that she really entrusted herself to God and the God who is love. She gave herself over to him. And that's beautiful. I want you to finish your story, but I want us, when you're done,
Yeah.
there's something that comes out of this that I think is really important in relationship to the problem of evil. Because, some people will see as what happened to her as an evil. She didn't look at it that way. And I think
Correct.
she transformed the whole experience with her disease. She transformed it into something that was incredibly beautiful and amazing and exemplary. I mean, it's even more exemplary. Well, it at least equals, if not rivals, even stories in war where a comrade will throw himself on a grenade to save his fellow comrades, or a warrior will continue to fight no matter how many times the warrior gets shot or gets shrapnel. Will continue to fight on, and knowing that the whole thing could be lost. But that's not the point. The point is something greater, and that's what the person is fighting for. It's amazing what you've shared. But anyway, I don't want to break it anymore. I want to hear the rest of it.
No, I've often compared, to simplify it, sometimes you don't have this much time to kind of wrestle or to present this, she was like a soldier. She did.
Yeah.
She gave the same demeanor of honor for something bigger than herself.
Yeah.
Was at stake. The other really amazing thing about her journal is she talks about her parents and she's concerned for them because they don't know the Lord. They have their own religious variations, but she knew that she wanted them to encounter Jesus Christ and see him for the beauty that he really is, that salvation is through him, but that's not because he's narrow-minded and judgmental. It's because he's gracious and he's the only solution.
Right.
And so to conquer death, the only way to get there is through Jesus Christ, to eternal life. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. She was very thoughtful towards her friends. She comments on her friends. She shows concern for them. Imagine that. She's dealing with her life on the line, and she's writing, and her thoughts are turning to her friends and her family and expressing her hope for them. It's quite powerful to read this whole thing. She just knew she needed to love this baby and do whatever it took, because this was the life entrusted to her. So after we make that decision to move forward with the pregnancy, we go to my sister's wedding in California, and then we go to Seattle, Washington, to the University of Washington Hospital. And it had an incredible cardiology department. Dr. Benedetti was the chief cardiologist at the time. I think he's in Spokane now. But anyways, he was a chief cardiologist at the hospital. And so we went there, walked in. She describes the coming in and getting settled and her fears. The only thing that we could do is stay off your feet. Don't exert any energy. Don't put demands on your body's resources of oxygen. It's very limited and it's not increasing. And so they put her on oxygen just so she had the most oxygen possible in her lungs for what blood could get through there. And then the body would distribute the resources to where it needed.
Sure.
And if she just stayed on bed rest, that was the best way to keep her energy levels down and not do anything. She shouldn't start running around and going for big walks and exerting herself and staying in shape. All those kind of things were off the table. So think that was another level of sacrifice for her.
Oh, yeah.
And so we transformed into being in the hospital. We got to stay in a hotel for a little bit and kind of live life normally for a little while. And it was devastating when she was like, it was getting worse and she had to get back into the hospital. But at that point, she was in a wheelchair whenever we went outside. So I would push her around in her wheelchair. She would have portable oxygen with her. So we were able to get outside. And the University of Washington is like the most gorgeous setting you'll ever have. And I actually spent quite a bit of time in the university library in between times. You can't see, my psychological health too was kind of like at task.
Sure.
And I still had to earn some money. So I was going around trying to get odd jobs being a window washer, because I did that for a job in Spokane in addition to my training as an intern. And so I was one of those guys that was walking along with a bucket and saying, "Can I wash your windows for $10?" So I was doing that. And then I would spend time, and some people hired me to do their homes, and I'd made $60 one time at a home to wash their windows. It was like, wow, this is a landfall. And some people my parents would, of course, help us, but nobody in our sphere was super wealthy. And so it was just like, man, we just got to hang in here, do what I can. And I was doing those things in addition to spending time with her. And I would go to the university library just to get away and just to think and just to kind of read books and kind of get my own mental health. That's how I deal with stress, as I read. So we were there for 5.5 months. She was in the hospital for 5.5 months from the time we checked in to the time of delivery. So during that time, the doctors had multiple conferences. They were amazing. When she actually was in the delivery room, there was 15 nurses, doctors, specialists, everybody. They're in the room and available. They even set aside a operating room, and just in case they had to do an emergency C-section if she wasn't going to deliver naturally, because that they decided was the best way. The least problem for her heart situation is if she delivered naturally, because a C-section would still be it would influence the blood flows, which is what heart congestion, that's the word I was looking for. The heart congestion, where everything would just start pooling together and confused on where it was supposed to go. So they had deliberated. They had talked about all the scenarios. Some were probably a little bit like, why are they doing this? Why didn't they have an abortion? But nobody ever put that on us. Nobody ever put that kind of stress on her. Never second guessed. In fact, I'll jump a little bit ahead here. Dr. Benedetti said after Tierre had passed away that we had done the right thing because her heart was basically one chamber. She couldn't have handled an abortion. And he's the chief cardiologist at the
Sure.
University of Washington Hospital, got some
Sure.
credibility there. And he studied her heart for months. And he said, she wouldn't have survived. You did do the right thing. She did. So imagine that scenario.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't. I short circuit when I think about I would have lost the baby and Tierre.
Sure.
And all for it just is like, wow. Anyways, by the way, the baby survives and she's alive and well. So let me get to that part. So they were very tenacious and very involved. We got to know so many nurses. We got to know so many specialists. They were so kind. We got to know our social worker. There's two of them that really became like sisters to me. They were very close in our hearts, and they really looked out for us and looked out for Tierre and did everything they could for her. Tierre did everything she could to just stay put.
Mm-hmm.
And I was staying in this really cheap hotel. It was pretty gross and disgusting, but it was near the hospital, and I didn't care because I was often out anyways. I was just there to sleep. Told the hotel, hey, you are supposed to, if you ever get a call from the hospital, you got to wake me up. Oh yes, we will for sure. Well, they didn't come and give me the message that she had gone into labor till like 6. And so I think at that point, I drove, or maybe I just ran because we were really close. Anyways, I got to the hospital as quickly as I could. She was still delivering. She was still processing. She hadn't delivered yet. They were setting her up. And they had also trained us in all these classes on what to do once she's delivered and what to do with the baby. They were just amazing. It was just the most amazing staff of people at that hospital. I can't believe how gracious and awesome they were when I look back on it. And she gets pulled into the room. They set her up in her operating room. And there's 15 different specialists all surrounding her. And she's just wired up with all sorts of tubes. And I'm just wedged in right next to her, holding her hand, everything else going on around me. She pushes, our baby is born, little girl. And this is the miracle. Okay. So Tierre survives. She lives through that delivery. She lives for 4 more days. I'll get to that in a minute. But Faye, remember, was just this little piece of spaghetti. She was 18 inches, but only 4 pounds.
Wow.
So normal height, but very low in weight. She had no body fat, but
Wow.
her lungs were developed. Her heart was developed. Everything was fully developed. So see what Tierre had done, staying put and just being oxygenated as much as he could. Her body, all the resources through the power of God, I'm convinced, because this shouldn't have happened. She carried to full term. That had not happened to any of the other studies that we had looked at.
Wow.
They were all giving birth at 5 months or 6 months or earlier, and the baby died or something like that. So to carry to term was like a miracle in and of itself, but
Sure.
the lungs are the last thing to develop. They kept thinking, should we induce or not? No, they wanted everything to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Just go with the way God designed the woman's body to nurture the baby. Don't interfere with it.
Yeah.
And the miracle is that she had everything fully, healthfully intact, just like any other baby, but no body fat. And she was beautiful because of it.
Mm.
A lot of babies are really squishy because they're, body fat, and they just got squeezed through a very narrow canal. And they're just you're supposed to say, hey, they're beautiful, but they're cute.
Right.
A few hours later.
Right.
Let's be honest. She was beautiful from the beginning. So the concern now turned to Tierre, and Tierre then was taken care of. She was still alive. She lived through the delivery. We got moved into ICU. So I was there in the ICU room. She was there in the ICU room, and the baby was there under a bilirubin lamp. She had jaundice a little bit, which is normal. It's not a big deal, nothing to be concerned about. But I was able to take care of her, and Tierre was able to breastfeed a little and hold her.
Oh,
and
good.
2 days in, we named her together. And so that was really special. And I have a beautiful picture of that moment where she's holding her. And then just because of the heart not being able to readapt to all the blood flow issues, she died of heart congestion on the 4th night. And during those first 4 days, the nurses were amazing. I would take care of Faye and they were teaching me how to feed her and hold her and do all those things that a dad should know how to do. It was very instinctive, though. It was like, it was just natural. But feeding and knowing the right proportions. And I even have her diapers still. To give you an example of how small she was, we called her bottom 2 thumbs. That's how tiny she was. If I put my 2 thumbs there on her bottom and I'm changing these little tiny preemie diapers, I mean, they're okay. But that was the size of her bottom, was the 2 thumbs. That was
Wow.
my joke. That was a joke for a while. And that all changed eventually, baby. I think within a few months, she's just like any other normal baby, chunky,
Yeah.
baby fat and crawling around and doing everything. And so my church, which I praise to the hilt, Faith Bible Church in Spokane, and the lead pastor there at the time was Chris Mueller and his wife, Jean. They really led the guard and helped with the funeral, and then helped me take care of Faye because I was just beginning my college career. I'd done all the applications before even we knew she was pregnant. I was on the track to getting an education degree at that time, and I put it on pause because I had to take care of Faye for a little while. But then, because she was born in September, so I missed that first term. But then I got back into it, and during those 3 or 4 months, 4 or 5 women and families helped me to take care of Faye while I was going to college. And so I got through college basically in 3.5 years, just to do it as quickly as possible and to get my teaching degree, which has been my job all through these years. And I've had the great privilege of being able to share Tierre's story with all of my classes. I've always made that a point of sharing what she did. Again, not for the abortion issue, but because of the love of God. This is what God's love means. It is so beautiful what God did for us through Jesus Christ. It's a love that's completely indescribable, but that can only be experienced once you see it. And that's what we always pray for, is for people to see and feel that love of God, that touch of God on their life, and that they see that Jesus is the way to have their sins forgiven, for them to walk away from the struggles and strife that they're engaged in, and walking towards him through Christ, the narrow wicket gate, and then the narrow path of obedience to God and walking in his ways. Yeah, we struggle, we stray. I've not been perfect in my life. Tierre wasn't perfect. None of us are. But she walked through the power of the Holy Spirit. God was so working in her heart and her life so powerfully for her to grasp the love of God and to live the love of God so beautifully at such a young age is so powerful to me. And it's really kept me anchored all these years through everything. And then I didn't get remarried for 10 years. So I got to raise Faye for the first 10 years. And I'm so thankful for all the families that helped me to get her to the stage where then Beth was able to take over and really teach her the stuff she needed to know that I had no clue about.
Right.
To be the mom she needed. And those ladies who
You guys do.
Yeah. No, don't even. What women have to go through. It's a reason that at God's creation, he doesn't say it's very good until after the woman is created. It was just good before. Now it's very good. Okay. This is it. This is the pinnacle. No more. Women. Amazing.
Well, I wanted to comment on that diary entry that you mentioned, about realizing that God had given her a soul to bring forward, and that she was solely dependent on God for this, and recognizing that that God loved her, through all of this. I studied the problem of evil. I studied it for decades, and the conclusion, I think the ultimate answer to the problem of evil is who, not what or why. It's who is in charge, who cares, who is at work. Whenever human beings suffer and they struggle, they don't want to do it alone. We want people to come around and help. We need to rely on others. Well, the ultimate dependency, the ultimate reliance should be upon the God, the one who created us, the one who loves us the most. and that's God. I mean, his love is infinite. I mean, I love my wife, I adore her, but her love for me is finite, and my love for her is finite. Tierre understood. She needed human beings around her, and she got that. But ultimately, she needed to know and rest in the God who loves her infinitely more than any of us ever could. And she did that.
Yeah.
That's the answer. It's not, we ask God often, why is this happening? That's not nearly as important as who are we going to rely on. That's where we need to go. And that's
Yeah,
what she understood.
we've often talked about atheism, the belief that there is no God at all behind everything. Without God, people would see what Tierre did as loss and a
Yeah,
defeat,
sure.
because there's nothing after this life. And so we're supposed to not yield ourselves to anything that diminishes our personal gain. So it's only material facts. There's no absolute moral anchor beyond one's self. So my point is that her choice
Mhm.
wasn't flawed altruism, but more of a covenantal love.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful story of God's love, and how it's also a wonderful example of the gospel, because one of the things that's clear as you go through the books of the Bible is that our salvation ultimately depends upon sacrifice, not our sacrifice, but a sacrifice that's done on our behalf. And that's what Christ does on the cross. That's the ultimate sacrifice. He didn't deserve it. But he gave himself over for it. He volunteered himself for it because of what it would accomplish and what it would express about how the Father loves us. That's what Tierre did. She sacrificed for Faye as a beautiful sacrifice, but she also recognized that that sacrifice brought her benefit too. It furthered her grasp, however, whatever that was, but it figured into her grasp of God's love for her. And so she could give, knowing that the giver of all, the greatest giver of all, was for her as well as for her child. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. There's a passage in the Bible that says, Jesus says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for your friend.
That's right.
And it's because it's the closest love to what God did for us and his son. And we weren't his friends, though.
That's right.
So we're his
enemies.
enemies, and he still laid down his life. So that elevates it even beyond what we can do.
That's right.
But there's the reward of glory, the crown of praise from Yahweh himself, the Lord of all. And she's resting in his beauty. And eventually all things are going to be wrapped up. All of us end up in the grave. We all face death. I look at what she did as she lived a noble life in the time that she had.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And don't we all wish that that's kind of how it'll be for us? Not just that we live a long, long time and stretch it out, but that we've lived nobly, that we've lived honorably, that we've lived in the will of God. Not just for our own self-glory, like, hey, I could create miracles, so God, you're supposed to love me, right? No, be in the will of God. Line up with him. So Christian ethics as mere self-denial, as we're just supposed to be unselfish and deny ourselves as an end in itself. That's not what we're teaching.
No.
The New Testament has much to say about self-denial, but not as self-denial as the end in itself. Lose your life to save it. It's actually self-preservation in a good way, in an eternal way.
Since you brought that up, a friend of mine, when I was in seminary, he did a lot of research on the crucifixion in the Roman world. What was its purpose besides to kill people? And this is what he concluded, and it has powerful bearing on what Jesus says about us picking up our cross and bearing our cross and following him, what all that really means. Because Jesus put it in the context of he was going to be killed. He was going to be crucified. So what my friend concluded, and I think he's right, is that the Roman state used crucifixion as a way of showing everyone that this rebel who's going to be executed is submitting finally to the Roman state. And this is why the person to be executed had to carry the crossbeam, his own crossbeam, to the execution site. It's also why they had to wear around them the charge against them, and which is what Jesus did too. He had to wear it,
Yeah, political.
right? They couldn't bring any moral charge, but the charge that was leveled against him, or what was publicly posted about him, was that he was claiming to be a king, and there could be no rivals to Caesar. So he was executed as a rebel, and he carries the crossbeam as a symbol that he's now under the authority of the Roman state, and there's nothing he can do about that. The Roman state has it over him. So he carries it. He's nailed to that cross. Now, when Jesus says to his disciples, pick up your cross, deny yourself, and follow me, if you put it in the context of this understanding of Roman crucifixion, this is what Jesus is saying. Pick up your crossbeam, pick up yours. He doesn't say pick up mine. He says, you pick up yours. What does that symbolize? That symbolizes if you're picking it up voluntarily, it's not being put on your shoulders. You're picking it up voluntarily and putting it on your shoulders. What you're saying is, I'm a rebel. And then he says, deny yourself. What does that mean? That means stop rebelling. That's the idea. I'm a rebel. Stop rebelling. Well, then who should we give obedience to? Follow me. He becomes our king. He becomes the one we follow. He's our center now. He's our authority. And that makes so much sense.
And what greater authority could we have? It's really interesting to me why people dislike Christianity. I know sometimes we get messy and involved in political structures and stuff. I think we need to pull back and do more ideological things, but still, hopefully that ideology has an influence on what's going on around us. But so setting that aside, where people get kind of annoyed with us, Christianity itself, what does it call us to be? Self-sacrificial, humble, help that old lady across the street, forgive one another, be a forgiving person. You were forgiven a lot. You better be willing to forgive a lot.
Right.
Quit hanging on to your bitterness. Quit hanging on to your anger. Let that go. Take up your cross, whatever that might be. If you have bitterness, take up that cross and follow Christ. And where does Christ lead? To be at peace with all people as much as it depends upon yourself. Do the best you can. Be honorable citizens. Peter talks about that. Don't be a criminal. Don't do horrible things to other people. Be generous. Treat women with honor and respect. Treat your wife with honor and respect. Treat your men with honor and respect. We're supposed to mutually respect each other and honor us as the image of God. It's a beautiful thing that we're asked to do, and yet somehow it gets twisted into sounding like we're the most evil people in the world. And really, we're just supposed to be generous with our money, our time, our resources, looking out for each other, loving our neighbor, all those kind of things we're supposed to be doing, which are wonderful, awesome things. And those are what true Christians are committed to. That is a beautiful thing. And that's what I see in the love of Tierre. And I wanted to share this too, because there's two aspects to this that I wanted to highlight. Okay, so I want to make sure this is really clear in summation. She knowingly chose the path of greatest personal risk for the life of her child. It was a knowing, conscious, willing thing that she did. She endured prolonged, intense suffering for the sake of another.
That's right.
Okay, so 5.5 months, she made decisions for the sake of another, but it was actually for herself too, because if she doesn't take care of herself, then everything falls apart early and they both lose their life. So there's this beautiful integration of, again, this idea of don't just look out for yourself, look out for the interests of others. We're supposed to make community and group type things, not just individual things just for our own personal benefit. So second one was she endured prolonged intense suffering for the sake of another for those 5.5 months. 3, her sacrifice directly resulted in life and the full tomb birth. And Faye now is married. She has children. It's a beautiful outcome. There's fruit that has been born from Tierre's sacrifice that transcends her life. We sometimes, if you're just believe in this world and that's all there is, you're only going to see rewards in this world. You're not going to see how God allows these bigger rewards that go beyond us and into future generations. Our little granddaughter, little Anastasia, wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the sacrifice of Tierre. And I'm looking forward to seeing the beauty of her life and what she becomes. And fourth, it was rooted in obedience to God and conviction. It wasn't merely emotional. Love is very emotional. Love has the component of emotion to it. We always try to say it is an action that we should do even if we don't feel like it. But love also has emotion. I don't say, I love you, son, or I love you to my daughters. I love you, little lady, without emotion. I also mean it in action, but there's emotion involved. Her obedience to God and conviction, and that's the beauty of her journal, is it shows her honest emotion in the midst of this conviction to be obedient to God. I really want to be clear. In making this decision, it wasn't just a random or emotion-driven type of decision. We had initial medical assessment, diagnosis, multiple doctors and their opinions on what was going on. We had a full understanding of what it was she was facing, and she did. We explored options, including abortion. We also sought spiritual and communal guidance. That's what I would recommend. That's the component that's missing from so many people's lives. Is we had a resource that some people may not have, is we had pastors and spiritually mature people that we could go to and honestly say, this is what we're struggling with. We need help and advice. What should we do? And so we were able to seek spiritual communal guidance. Some people have that, don't have that at all. They just get to hear one side of the story. They might go to a secular advisor who just gives them one perspective on what they're facing. And that's not education. Education is knowing all of those things. We heard the abortion side and we heard the pro-life side. She made the decision, though, not on any of those arguments, but on her focus on the love of God and how he looks out for us. And then she faced that with commitment, that decision, and endurance. When she made that decision, even as terrifying as it was to her, she went forward nobly with commitment and endurance. That, to me, is so miraculous. Her decision, her courage, all miraculous. And then when Faye was born, so healthy and healthy to this day, it wasn't a genetic problem she had. It was merely a defect.
Right.
Sometimes there's no explanation for it.
Right.
But the explanation now is it was for the glory of God.
Yeah. Very powerful. It's one of the most amazing stories I've heard in my life, Tierre. And you know what? You made a sacrifice too. You made a sacrifice, and knowing that you were going to lose your wife, wondering if you were also going to lose your child in the process, and even wondering what your child was going to be like, through all this. And then as a single dad, even though you had help, you were still a single dad. And the ultimate responsibility for Faye's life was on you. And that is not easy, my friend. That's tough. I'm glad you had people who came around you and helped to carry that burden. But you've made a lot of sacrifices too.
I've commented on this, so hopefully, people won't be offended. It's kind of funny. I mean it as a joke, okay? I truly do understand why women like malls so much. It's like a mystery to me as a guy. And then because I would find myself like, well, I have this baby that I'm taking care of and I want to do something, but I can't just do normal things.
Right.
I know. I'll go to the mall. And so you can walk around the mall in the middle of winter and it's all covered and all you do is look at stuff and you feel like there's life going on. It's like, it's tough for moms to be moms. There's challenges there.
Yeah.
And so I had a little flavor of that. Certainly in no way was capable as a mom. And that's why I feel gifted that God eventually, the right woman came into my life. There were women that I dated before that were awesome. They were amazing, but it was just, you don't have to hate people not to marry them. It's like, it's just not what God wanted. And that's perfectly fine. They're wonderful women that I dated. A couple of them were really serious, but then God brought into my life Beth, and it was just magical, and it's been really wonderful. And again, that womanly flavor was then introduced to Faye. And she had women in her life, but it was never the mom.
Right.
There was so many. It was never one she became attached to.
Right.
And so she had to put up with me eating macaroni and cheese. Still probably her favorite thing. And I must say, I make the best macaroni and cheese of anybody. Not even my wife can surpass me. Now, she can cook exotic things, and they're wonderful, but macaroni and cheese, I've got her on.
Well, I have to say, one of the things I've not had your mac and cheese, so I can't say this, but I can say that one of the things that has always drawn me to you is that you're a man of more depth than many men I know. And I'm always drawn to that. I'm drawn, and it includes women too, women who have more to them than just talking about hair and fingernails and that kind of thing. You know, I look for depth. I look for people who are thinking carefully about things, and whether I agree with them or not isn't the point. It's that I look for thoughtful people, and if you put on top of that caring people as well, that's even better. So thoughtful, caring people, and you've always struck me as that kind of individual. And over the years, our conversations and our work together, you know, has proven that countless times. So I'm going to pat myself on the
Likewise.
back and say I made a good decision in befriending you.
Well,
I'm
think
glad
of
you
decided
decided
sovereignty
you
you
wanted
wanted
to
in
be
that.
my friend too.
Because I think we met soon after I got married to Beth. And so the big blessings in my life that it's a mutual feeling for sure.
And I think Tierre would be happy too that the sacrifices she made has borne such wonderful fruit. And I think she would be delighted in Faye and the woman that Faye has become. For the sake of our podcast listeners, you know, I got to teach Faye and love that.
Right.
And she's a wonderful young woman then, and she's grown to be just an incredible
She's the sweetest
woman.
thing ever.
Yeah, just really
She's so
wonderful.
sweet.
She's a real joy. So, thank you to Tierre for her incredible sacrifice and her great courage, and thank you for God providing all the people who came around you. You and Tierre cared for you during that time and cared for you after. You know, it's a wonderful story. It shows what human beings can do if human beings will really seek to understand and show real empathy, not fake empathy like you so often see.
But it's to conquer death, seeing beyond the darkness. And we can choose to do good things, but we cannot choose to be perfect. We don't have the capability. Christ was perfect for us, and his resurrection is evidence that those who have trusted him for salvation will rise from the dead someday too. Death is temporary. Death is temporary for those who have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. And
Right.
he wants everybody to be redeemed. Do you trust him? Have you surrendered your efforts to improve yourself? Have you given up your own efforts to, I can do it myself. I can make myself into that perfect person that I need to be and live this life. And even though I just go back into the dust, I'll be a good person along the way. If you can't do it, have you surrendered your efforts to improve yourself? If you're in another religion and you're meditating in the morning every day at 5 a.m. to improve yourself, that's awesome. I like to improve myself spiritually with spiritual disciplines too, but it isn't going to save me. It's not going to be enough. There's still going to be that stain on my heart. I may be able to purify 99% of my heart, but there's still that one dark spot that I can't get rid of. I've heard people that I know describe it exactly that way, and they still haven't become Christians because they think they can scrub off everything, and we can't. We need his perfection. So if you accepted his offer to forgive you, pain and suffering in this world will be over someday. Evil will be judged someday. And there will be no more death someday. Christ came to conquer death. Life is awaiting us beyond this darkness. Believe. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. John 17:3. There we go. Maybe that's a good way to end.
That's a great way to end. Thank you.
Well, that's all for this episode of Let's Talk. Bill Watkins and I, Corey Piper, thank you for joining us. We started our conversations together over 20 years ago in the hallway of a school, and we've never stopped talking. We're happy that you're going to be joining us. No sermons, just honest discussions. If this sparks something in you, hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Also share this with a friend who's wrestling with the same questions. We're all in this together. And please drop a 5-star review if we're helping you think more deeply. It fuels the algorithm and spreads the dialogue. Until next time, keep reasoning, keep growing. See you soon.